Hello, friends, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discourse in Magic with Julie Eng. Julie is the executive director at Magicana, and in this episode, we talk about her journey through magic from a very young age. And I think a lot of us can relate to being in magic from a very young age and it being involved in all aspects of our lives, but she has also had her hand in incredibly interesting magic areas, from magic stores to magic shows, all the way to producing one of the best-selling magic books of all time. I think you're really going to love this episode. You're going to learn all about Magicana and what it is, and about an award for thousands of dollars that a listener of this podcast could very well win. I think you're going to love it. Here it is, another episode with Julie Eng. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah, and we are here with Julie Eng. How are you?
I'm great.
I'm super excited to be here with you, and I'm super excited we could do this in person.
Yes,
at
me
your
too.
home. We've got beautiful magic posters.
Welcome to my abode.
Thank you. This is so lovely. And we were talking a little bit before we turned on the mics about how one of the things that this podcast has allowed me to do is really connect with some of the people that are local.
Yeah.
And, you know, Magicana is this organization in my literal backyard.
Yes, here in Toronto.
Right. And then I realize more and more that I don't really know that much about some of the history of people here. So let's dive in. Let's talk about it. How did you get started in magic even?
Okay. Well, as the story goes with me, I was born into it. My father was a magician, and I literally was pulled out of a hat. My dad used to tell a joke where, I wasn't delivered by the stork. I was pulled out of the hat. My mom has a totally different story. But I really was involved with it from day one. I have a younger sister, and we were both in the family show very early on. I have memories always being in costume, on stage, a part of my father's show. So it's been in my blood forever. It got interesting when my dad decided to do two interesting things. One, he was always an entrepreneur. So he was always selling. I was always around sales. That's how I grew up. And he ended up being a bartender. He wanted to not do like the big wholesale sales anymore. He wanted to do something more interesting. A friend got him into bartending, and he started doing magic bartending, and that was like a massive, change for my dad, and that influenced me.
He was doing magic before. He got to do like bar magic.
Yeah,
and, regularly.
Exactly. He grew up with an interest in magic. He was a kid, same thing.
Yeah,
barber showed him a cool coin trick, and that was it. He was hooked. Yeah. But my grandparents had a restaurant. So he would do tableside magic. He didn't even realize what he was doing. He was just working for tips.
Magic,
yeah. So that got him into it. So that always was an interest for him. My dad didn't drink. He was the best bartender. He was a great bar manager. He didn't drink. So he got into like entertaining, and he carved out a little corner for himself at the Red Lion Inn and in Victoria. I grew up in Victoria, BC. Yeah. So he was doing this a lot, but I was a little kid when all of this is happening. So at one point he was working for the on the pier, Army Navy bartending club. So the bar club. So my dad would pick us up, and somehow I remember being there. My sister doesn't have the memory, but we're in the back office, but it's like, 4:00 and waiting for mom to come and get me. Right. So I'm hanging out with the guys from the Army Navy Club. So, I learned interesting things at 6 years old, Yeah. So that's always been part of what I've seen, how you interact with people, what service is about, like hospitality. He was always doing a little bit of magic, always. I grew up in a small town, so they knew he was the magician, and he would have a trick in his pocket, or always entertaining, and people always recognized him. So I grew up with that. But
yeah, that's something.
That's my education, was just being a kid.
Did you ever not know how the tricks work?
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's one of those things. Like, it's not that I wanted to work it out so much. I was always around it, so I loved watching it, like every I think child has in that interest. But I was also a part of like lectures and selling and later on my dad had a magic shop. So I started demoing and selling, and I got the hang of it too. And there's a whole fun history of that as well in our family.
So what was that There's a few things you said that are really interesting. So the first one that really got me is the Family Magic Show.
Yeah.
So what's the Family Magic Show? And then we'll get to the Family Magic Shop. But what is a Family Magic Show?
See, I agree. Like, it makes me laugh because I'm like, oh, I never thought of that.
Right.
Our family
Most
grew up
families don't
having
have
a
magic
show.
shows.
I do remember a story. I was about, I don't know, 11 or 12. So maybe grade 6 or grade 7, something like that. And we had a new teacher to the school. So she was my teacher, and I loved this lady. And she didn't know that my dad had this long history of performing magic at the school. Okay, so we're talking about Houdini. My hand goes up when she says, "Who's seen a straitjacket before?" Right? And I'm like, "Oh, okay.
I've sold one." No, not yet, not yet, or whatever.
Yeah, but it's
But
like, yeah. Well, where have you seen it? Well, my dad has one, right? And she's like, she is so
uh-huh,
not getting
right.
this. It's like, what is this kid? She seems so, pulled together. And I said, well, my dad has one. And do you think, your dad would be able to bring it in to show the class? I'm like, yeah, I guess
maybe.
so. I said, do you want him to demonstrate it? She goes, what do you mean demonstrate? So we went through this whole thing. Now, this poor lady did not understand. My dad had this history of performing for like families in the school forever.
Right.
And the grade 7 year was the year he would normally do the show for a fundraiser. They'd go off.
So it's literally all happening all together.
Yeah.
Oh,
And so
that's
she
super
was
funny.
blown away when my dad comes. He pulls out the straitjacket. Now, we did a special presentation for the grade 6, grade 7 class, and he's doing this whole thing. But I know it's a shtick with my dad. Like, it's a thing. And it's a joke with us. It's always been a joke. So here he is, doing the huffing and the puffing. It's all, I'm going to break Houdini's record. And, it's a very dramatic moment. But this lady now, my wonderful teacher, she happens to be about 7.5 months pregnant. She's about to go on mat leave. She's pacing like a cat back and forth. She's so nervous. She's, Mr. Eng is going to have a heart attack on my watch. And she didn't, the setup was hilarious. So, of course, my father escapes, and it's very dramatic, and my classmates think he's the best thing since sliced bread. So and I'm laughing because, like, how could you not know? Like, this is my dad. So that's our history. It's like we would do these shows throughout Victoria and beyond. My dad had a touring show, so we went on little tours up the island, dragging a trailer full of gear.
I was going to say, what was your role in the show? Like, did you?
It depended on my age. Sometimes I was just the production. Sometimes I had to fill in a bit. Sometimes I had to do chunks.
It's like I fit in the box and I didn't fit it anymore.
Yeah,
So then I had to
next.
do production. Right, next role. That's awesome.
Yeah, you get boxes, you get stuffed into. I do not have any claustrophobic tendencies, and these things I take for granted. You see a small space. Oh yeah, I can hop in there.
Right.
Like, it doesn't bother me.
You didn't think about it.
I don't.
Oh, that's funny.
Swords are coming at you. There's no
Whatever,
problem. Yeah,
yeah.
Chains, whatever. Like, let's get on it.
Talk to me about the magic shop.
So that shop came after my dad had a bartending school. So he was a bartender. He had a bartending school. Everything was, very sort of happy and lucrative business for my family. But my dad had always wanted a magic shop. And there happened, Victoria is a tourist town. So there happened to be there's a history of magic shops. And there was a few of them in different locations in the downtown core. And one came up for sale. And it was one of those things. It seems every other owner seemed to have this hit and miss with different locations, different, personalities. So he bought it from a lady who had just bought it from another guy. And I knew the other guy. He was Crazy Frank. And that was fun. That's how I grew up. He's a trick and joke shop. So my dad always loved this idea. And it suited him. That was his crazy sort of personality. So we get an opportunity. I'm trying to remember how old I am, but I'm a little older. I'm in high school, I believe, because I don't think I could yet drive. And he buys the magic shop. I'm like, oh my God. So first we had this bartending business. Now we have this. Now we have...
What a crazy feeling. Like
Here we go again.
Oh my gosh.
So he gets into retail and he gets a great location downtown. He sets it up, but it's a trick and joke shop, not a magic shop.
Right.
And Herb Morrissey, we befriended after a begrudging effort from Herb. He was very like, you're going to do what? Like, you're not going to survive in a magic world.
Oh
Like,
my
he was trying to
gosh.
talk my dad out of
Yeah.
it. They became really good friends.
Wow.
And he was very supportive. And so he said, to make your shop work, you got to get into this and that. And he really helped us find that of the balance of magic, tourism, Halloween, all that stuff. So we would service the community, like the local community, with a bunch of things. And it's really great fun, sure, when you're selling and you're demoing and when it's a busy time, like Halloween was like our Christmas
Totally.
time.
Yeah.
But it's also retail, and
Yeah.
it's very demanding.
And there's certain times of year that are just like
madness.
right,
Yeah,
total madness.
yeah.
You spent a lot in the store. You worked in a demo
Oh yeah,
and stuff.
yeah, and that was a very formative time for me.
That seems like when one gets their chops.
It's interesting. I had to demo and work a lot.
Yeah.
And as I said, like when cruise ships came into town, thousands of people would infiltrate our city. So they would jam themselves into our store. We're a small store. And it was great fun because,
Right.
you would just be demoing.
Crazy
It's
demos, good
exciting and
audiences and stuff,
everybody's high energy. They
Yeah.
want to spend. They're having fun.
Yeah.
And it was at a time when the Canadian dollar was also very, very good for trade for Americans. So we
Yeah.
were really busy, and I worked a lot. So I guess I did,
Yeah.
I learned how to do stuff like a classic force and
But like you learn stuff like that where one of the biggest secrets in magic is that the repetition on our end is what allows us to pull things off that are impossible. Things like classic forces and other like psychological forces that
Sure.
come from just like,
Confidence, yeah.
well, I did this 1,000 times, so I know you're gonna pick this one.
you've gotten past the nervous level. Are you going to take it?
Yeah. You're
Are
on
you
the
gonna
other
pick the
side
right
of
one?
it. Yeah, exactly.
And then you also learn how to present it. I often say that, I'm sure you do the same when you're teaching, there's the practice side of it, there's the technique of practice, but there's the sort of rehearsal or the performance side of the practice, if you will. And there's two different entities with magic, and I loved that the shop put me on that sort of hot
It's literally like
front
testing.
burner,
You
all
get
the
to,
time.
Like, be a part of it.
And you could move through people. So yeah, I think there was a lot of repetition in many, many ways.
So walk me through a little bit more of the journey. So you were born out of a top hat or whatever.
Yes.
You did magic shows all over. You were demoing in a store.
Well, with the dad who's a magician,
Yeah.
there's two girls in his family, so I'm the eldest, and that became my thing. He didn't really seem to matter to him that I was
Right.
a girl or a boy. So I always had like that relationship with him. So he taught me all the things he thought I should know. So he wanted to make sure I could, change my tire on my car so I wouldn't get stuck. I knew how to solder something. We're working on something about the speakers on one of our shows, and something pops, and you just have to quickly just, it's a soft solder. Yeah. He goes, well, this is how you do it. I'm like, okay. So you just learn all these little interesting things. And we were fixing the kitchen sink, same thing. Pass me the soldering iron. Okay. It's one of those experiences of growing up hands-on with your family like that. So when I got into learning a lot of this magic stuff, my dad naturally then said, well, maybe you should start doing a show now. And so he would set me up with my stuff. This is before we had the store. So I would start it off like everybody else, doing birthday parties. Then he slowly, pushed me into doing the restaurants. And he had a regular gig, so I'd often fill in for him.
What
And
a
that was
really
fun.
cool thing. Like, oh, I can't make it. My daughter's gonna fill in for me. Like, that's amazing.
That and the shop, I used to get all kinds of
Yeah,
calls
that's amazing.
for work. So you can see as my timeline moves along, my dad got me started. He set me up with all of my shows. He drove me there. He only charged me $5 a gig.
My parents drove me there too. Drove me to gigs too.
So it's exactly like that, very supportive, one after another. And he taught me, how to book it, how to
Every step of
provide
it.
value for your
Yeah,
clients.
yeah.
And those were invaluable life skills, and I studied business for my education, but I already had
You had all that
deep
knowledge. It was
education
all-
in it. Yeah.
So talk to me about the journey. So one of the points that I'm always interested in talking about is when you decide to not have a real job and be a magician, and so usually it happens somewhere around the going to school part, right? So
It's true.
tell me about that and how
Yeah.
that sort of unfolded for you.
Well, and I was very busy in high school with my shows. You know, it was one of those things. I already had this part-time job. Then I had the shop. That was another part-time. And it almost became too much of a job for me. It's here you are trying to finish school and get into this non-conventional career path where I grew up doing this. So I'd had enough.
So let me go
can
try
I
something
have
crazy
a
like
normal,
business.
yeah,
or
let me
something.
have a normal government job
Yeah.
kind of desk thing for a
Like,
while.
oh, this is too, yeah. That's
And
funny.
I found that was a really interesting thing. Like I was kind of rebelling, like I've had enough, you know, but I had a lot of years into that. So I started going to university, and when I started off I was very unsettled, and I finally, where did I end up? I ended up in business. You know, my natural brain sort of thinking and trajectory and interest.
So what you've lived, like living as being a magician in a shop and performing and all this stuff is being business, like giving, like learning what value
Transactions.
is, learning,
Yeah.
like sales, like it's all like,
Yeah, but learning. Well, I ended up taking an entrepreneurial sort of stream. It was a little unusual at UVic where I went to school, and I loved it because it took some of the things that I was learning. I was able to see it in action, and I was employing at the shop. You know, it was like I had this really great sandbox to employ interesting theories and you know, and I'd write all these things up, and I was really into it. You know, it was like, now I'm interested. Now this means something different for me because I could see it as an entity, not my
not like magic
obligation, right? Like my family obligation. So I have to say, for me, school was really important. It gave me structure and it gave me a foundation. And then what do you do in university? You have to present. Well, I can do that.
Right.
That I can do.
Right.
And I got really into that too. I found that really fun and easy. I could nail down points. I could, you know, that's what I did all day long at the shop, in my shows, trade shows. Like I knew how to do this. In my final years in my commerce degree, you know, we had to do mock sales, but we also had to do like these case studies. So I had to sell a point,
Right.
like a lawyer would. Like I really got into that. I thought that was
And
fun.
you knew how to do that
And I'm
too.
like,
Right.
this is my thing. I
Yeah.
can do this.
Yeah.
And I started to see like, okay, this is interesting because I was memorable. I could argue a point. They liked me because I would make it easy to understand and I could distill it, but I would entertain them. So they remember my points. And that was really interesting. So I learned a lot in that. And I was really empowered by that. That was a really great moment for me to realize, okay, so all those years were useful for a really great
It's not
reason.
wasted on magic. It's like it's for something.
And then Magic Bee started to become fun again, you know, because now it was really, instead of being a kind of a thing I was doing, it helped the thing I wanted to do. It was my springboard now. And I was having fun. You know, I was interested, and when you're maturing as well, so you can see how the magic impacts people. And I was more confident, so I was doing way more close up and way more walk around, like in cocktail parties and my friends' parties. And I was getting into that now. Before I was so shy and I felt a little awkward, and you know, restaurants were always, but I was that much younger. I started really, really young, and I looked a lot younger than I was, and I felt
Sometimes it just helps to be a few years older. Just
yeah,
a few.
yeah, no,
But
to
all of that in
mature
combination,
along.
like
Yeah.
yeah. So what happened? You finished school and you're like, I'm coming back to make the shop better. Or what?
Yeah.
What?
Well, that was really an interesting. Funny you should say that. I mean, yeah. So I've got this degree now. What? And it was a really interesting point in my life where my dad sort of said this interesting thing that I never expected. There was an opportunity to work in Toronto. I had, by happenstance, came through Toronto just to visit a friend. I happened to meet up with my colleague, Ben, and he happened to be looking for someone for the show. I knew nothing about his show. I knew nothing really about his stage set. I only knew him from close-up, as a close-up magician. I didn't know he was doing this theatrical thing. So I happened to get cast for this job, and I thought, well, it's over Christmas. Forget it. I can't do it.
And what exactly was the?
That was for The
that
Conjurer.
job? Oh, right.
Yeah, I think that was like the fall of 1997. I came here in Toronto, and that show, I had to turn around and come right back. He gave me 2 weeks to think about it, and I'm like, I'm flying home tomorrow. I have to pack my things and leave my life. And it was over the Christmas season. I just started picking up shows. And I thought, oh, well, I can't do that. My natural instinct was to...
It's like, I'm busy during that month.
Yeah,
like,
walk away.
I couldn't go.
Nice to think of me, thanks, you know. And my dad said, no, you know what? I've taught you all that I can learn. Now it's time for you to really turn things around for yourself. You need to work with another person, and you need to learn to work like this guy does. He seems to work a lot smarter, not harder. He says, that's what I do. You need to work smarter. And he saw that David was expanding magic as a platform for himself. Like he saw this opportunity, and he also was doing something really different. So that was another, my dad said, look, you know how to do a touring show. You've never worked in theater. You never worked any of these things. This could be really good for you. So that was it. And what turned out to be a 3-month contract is like, I don't know, 22 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's start getting into Magicana. So if someone is hearing this and they're like, what is Magicana?
So that's a great question.
Magicana? What is it?
Magicana is an arts organization.
Okay.
And we have a mandate that is to study, explore, and to advance magic as a performing art. So what does that mean? Well, we could maybe elevate the public's view of what magic is, or perhaps provide a view of what magic is.
Right.
Because I think the public, I'm sure from your own experiences, both in the podcast, in the magic world, and maybe in the public world where you're performing, people all have their definitions of magic. And that's great. But there's also a whole bunch of them. Like, they're very wide ranging. But when I say that, I mean they're very vast. So we want to give the public, and I see the magicians as a subset of the public, a new or perhaps an alternative view of what could magic be? Where does it come from? Why is it so great? So we have this interesting mix of looking into the past with, the golden age or the history of magic. And we also look at innovators of magic. Mm-hmm. We are very, very fortunate to have the happy administrative duty of administering the Alan Slade Awards for magic. Mm-hmm. And it celebrates excellence in magic. Mm-hmm. So we provide this platform. And what makes this particular awards program exciting for us is the Slate Family Foundation has put money behind this award. So there's $50,000 that it's given away every year for the last 5 years. This is our 5th year. And it's super exciting because people are being recognized for their artistry and for raising the profile of magic and challenging its definition, whatever that definition may be. Right. And that's exciting. We want to be a part of that. So Magicana sort of fosters, provides, supports, is a resource. I like to think of us as like this large archive of magic as well. So we have done many things like producing shows for the public and for magicians. So we do like lectures, seminars, and workshops. We also produce a lot of books and publications, such as a periodical called Magical, which is a quarterly journal on magic history, which is not so quarterly anymore. But it's fascinating to me. There are endless subjects on magic history.
Yeah.
You never mind going forward. Look at the past. It's so rich. And there are interesting characters, and we can learn a lot from how did it work then? How could we employ that now? How do we tie this together? We have an understanding of what our foundation is in terms of our history. And I think that's kind of cool too.
Okay, so before we get into Magicana, I want to get into some of those ideas of like changing the views of or understanding it. So maybe what should someone think that magic is?
Well, that's too broad for me. I'm too biased. I've grown up in it. I can't tell you.
You can't unsee it.
I started too into it. But looking at my friends, it's interesting. It's my sister, her circle of friends. They don't know me. This is my point. They're the true public. And then they meet me. And then they find out from my nephew more often than not, who's 4 years old, my auntie's a magician. Right. And like, like they always
Like, they don't-
question that.
It's so.
Are
yeah.
you sure?
Yeah.
He's 4, so they're allowed to ask
It's like the
for
girl
clarity.
saying, "Oh, my dad has a straight jacket at home. No problem. He can bring it in."
It's so funny that you should find that parallel. But yeah.
So you also mentioned magic as an art form.
Yeah.
And it is, all these conversations, what is magic as an art, whatever. So what does it mean to you when you talk about magic as an art form? What are you referring to?
Is it an art form? It's one of those very interesting questions. I'm not. I'm
Is
still.
it-
I
is- it-
yeah.
is
I
it-
still
yeah.
float back and forth.
Yeah.
And I think it depends on what we participate in, what we see, what we want to see. Perhaps there's that wishfulness, a wish fulfillment of if
Yeah.
only, right?
Yeah.
And I see a lot of magic. I have this great job of advancing the world of magic, but I also love magic. I grew up in it. It's interesting to me. We see different people performing, so it gives me a wide range. I've seen a lot, and I've been very, very fortunate to have seen really great performers. I've been very spoiled, and I'm very grateful for those opportunities. So I think I've seen so much that it becomes really difficult to say, well, this is an art and this is a craft.
Of course.
Or this is a craft and this is an art. Like, I can't nail that down, because I think in the subsets of performing magic, there's busking, there's children's magic, there's sales, like motivational speaking and using the sales of magic in that regard, like trade shows. There's also pure performance. There's a massive range to what these subsets are in magic. So I think they each have their needs of how does that definition work for them. So I can't say what is the art of it. What I love is something interesting visually, something that moves me, something that, wow, I never thought that could be done before. That is so interesting or cool, or I'm moved. I'm physically having to really think about it. And that reflection, that thinking, that absorbing. We were talking about Derek Delgadio's show in New York, in and of itself. That moved me. I was moved by that experience. So for me, this is an art. And it's not to say that some of the things that we've seen here in Toronto, you and I just happened to see the same show from a magician from Spain. It's not to say his isn't art. It's just a different kind of art, because the dynamics are so...
It's just different, yeah.
You can't even compare.
They're entirely different.
Yeah. So I would say for me, I could be moved by watching some people perform. I've seen lots of shows at conventions, for example, and they're like, oh, it's just the run of the mill. No, I see someone who poured their soul into thinking this through, to really creating something interesting. And if it moves me, I would say to me that is an art, but I can't speak for everyone else around me.
So one of the things I'm wondering is about the public perception of magic.
Me too.
And yeah, and like, is magic built right now to have fans of magic that are not magicians? Like, I feel like if you watch every episode of Penn and Teller Fool Us, and then you go see a magic show, you will feel maybe underwhelmed, because you're like, well, I've seen all of this already. You know what I mean? Like,
that's
so
interesting.
I'm
yeah.
always wondering, like, what is it that I would want in a dream world for an audience to come to the table thinking about magic? Do I want them to have seen David Copperfield and think about magic in a dream? Do I want them to have seen Penn and Teller Fool Us many episodes so that they have a context for a different variety? Like, what would I even want? So what do you think about when, like...
Well, it's a great question. I think that what something like Penn and Teller's Fool Us, or America's Got Talent, or all of these sort of variety shows, I think it's changed the landscape of how people see magic. So let's just go back maybe, not even 10 years, where David Blaine had that whole sort of
window.
Like this whole genre of magic to himself almost. Like, I don't want to call it street magic, but it was this sort of reality TV magic,
Totally.
Like it was
That's
exactly. It was cold to the public, and they didn't know what was coming at them. And now people kind of recognize it almost as this, that's a David Blaine thing, or a genre. Right. Like they get it's a thing. It's a container of where that kind of magic belongs. So I feel like now, when you talk about things like, let's just say Fool Us, for example, Penn and Teller's Fool Us, that has this almost variety show aspect to it, where it's like you said, it's just like bang, 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 just like trick after trick. It's a little,
Like America's Got Talent of magic
yeah, it just has a lot of magic
packed in.
And so I think in this world of consumption, and particularly that visual medium, just almost force fed on us, everywhere we look on our devices, we are seeing moving pictures now. And it's like we almost become deadened to it, because how do you cope when you have so much information? You can't distill it anymore. So it's almost like I want, if I wanted for the public, maybe them not to have seen all of that. And or just a little bit.
Right. No, but that's what I'm saying. Like, it's like, what do I want a neophyte to come to, like, what do I want someone to come to my show knowing? Do I want them to think like, oh, magic show, that's like for kids, and then I have to be like, oh no, or do I
it
want
still
them...
has this though,
Of
right?
course.
Yeah. And it's very interesting that, so going back to the analogy of my nephew, he's 4, he's a kid.
Yeah.
So all the families think that's really cool, because they see me as this children, they assume I'm a children's magician, because that's how they see it. And that's a perfect analogy of it, because I think that's kind of a thing where people see, okay, it's great, we have kids, we need a magician. Like, it's like this is fill in the equation thing, it's like that's the answer. And that's an age old thing as far as I'm concerned, because I grew up performing a lot of children's birthday shows and Christmas shows, and that's how I also saw it and learned it. But it's not all that we are, right? And that's where I believe something like Magicana can help say, this is a great thing to celebrate and to recognize, and there's a very long history in performing for children. And it also has this huge other range of potential ways of looking at magic. And I think that's what people find interesting.
So before we get into Magicana for magicians, let's talk about, how would a non-magician interact with Magicana, or how would you want a non-magician to interact with Magicana? Because it seems like an outward-facing organization. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and we would like to be viewed this way. I think it's a nice way to invite the public in. And as I said earlier, I see Magicana's audience as the public, and we have this huge, when I say that, I imagine this large pool of people. Now, in that pool of people, there's subsets of people who have interest in magic, who are performing magicians, who are professional magicians. Like, there's all these ranges of their interest in magic. So I don't believe that they're unique in that, the mutually exclusive dynamic, right? So Magicana would like to see people walk away with this feeling of, wow, I saw something really magical. I mean, that's a very overused word, but it's like the public performances we've done in the past for arts festivals like Luminato. We had this opportunity to really participate with a great arts festival with interesting magicians to do really unusual and interesting projects around magic. So we did Magic in the Dark, that springs to mind. Well, see, that's a great notion. The public's going to ask you, a magician will ask you, how do you do magic in the dark?
Right.
Well, come on in.
Right.
Yeah.
Come find out.
And it was great.
Yeah.
It was really great. And I know you had Steve Cohen on your show recently, and he came up from New York to Toronto to participate in our festival, because he brought his beautiful chamber magic to Toronto for our festival. And it got such a great hit, because people, I never knew, right? I love hearing that.
Right.
Magic could be seen this way, or experienced this way, or felt this way. And as you know from Steve, he creates this very thoughtful show in that everybody experiences something from the moment they press purchase, and even in fact before, because he's created a vision in their mind of what they should feel and expect. A beautiful, rich, interesting, dynamic, interactive. Like, I love how he's created that feeling. And, that's another great thing, for the public. He does not perform for magicians. He performs for the public.
Right.
Now, if magicians go and see that, that's great.
Right, it's great too, but it's for the
Yeah.
public. So let's talk a little bit about Magicana. There's almost so many cool areas that I feel like magicians don't know about, or many magicians don't know about, and their eyes might be like, wide open. So one of them right now, which I think is really cool to talk about, is some of the archiving of videos. And I know myself, I've like gone through and watched Tamarie's videos and Gaetan Bloom videos.
Cool.
And it's really cool because, you know, as a kid, it felt like reading a book about a rumor of Vernon traveling to here to do this is how I had to understand magic from 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And now to be able to be like, oh, I see it now. I'm not. So very cool, like incredible to watch this footage. Talk to me a little bit about what this is and where people can find it. And
I believe what you're referring to is what we're calling the screening room.
The screening room.
So we have a wonderful donor in the Slate Family Foundation. And Gary Slate challenged Magicana. Our artistic director, David Ben, and Gary had this great conversation. Let's make this great archive of magic available for the public. Okay, how do you do that? So that became our job.
Right.
And we said, okay, so how do you do this? And it was interesting because at the time, my colleague David had just he's acquired for many years, collections. You know, this is how you get into magic, and then you buy collections and you start sifting through the interesting things that you found in this collection. Well, one of 3 collections that David acquired, I should say, had videotape. And this is now an ancient medium, but not so long ago it really wasn't.
VHS.
And we started finding good quality VHS. You know, those who know the medium, it can be very touch and go. It can be like a tape cassette. It just deteriorates. There's nothing there. But this stuff we were getting was not run over time after time after time. So it was really quite clean analog, which we could then digitize. And so that's what started with the Magic Castle. The Magic Palace. And the Magic Palace was a show that Dale Harney put together. I think it was the late 70s, early 80s, you know, something like this. And he was out of Edmonton, I believe, the studio, and he got this little regional studio to do this variety show of basically 3 acts plus Dale. And it's like about a 30-minute program, I believe.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And you know, that was amazing. And Dale got connected with Johnny Thompson. Johnny was then the programming director, bringing up the artists for Dale's show. So he was feeding all kinds of interesting people from California up the West Coast to perform in the theater, in the studio. So we happened to get a really wonderful cache of these videotapes from David's collection, but we didn't have all of them. And we kind of reached out to a few people. And the next thing we know, we get VHS sent in from Larry Thornton from Calgary, who had pristine prints. And we're just like, wow. So he helped us fill in a lot of what we didn't have. And Larry and I were emailing back and forth, and he was happy that it was being done. He goes, but that's not art. He goes, what I'm most proud of are these, 8mm, 16mm films I did, of Paul Harris. I have Mike Skinner. And I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, I've never really played them for anyone. So we're like, this never before seen stuff of people in their prime.
Wow.
And that's this movie magic exhibition that we have on Magicana's site. So we started curating. It's an overused word these days, but we started carving out ways of looking at the screening room, these video archives, in interesting ways. So here, you want to see the Magic Palace. This is fun because you're going to see interesting acts. Yes, it's dated in terms of its costuming and its perhaps presentation, but the magic is really interesting.
And also, that's the whole point, like watching dated magic, is that it's dated. Like if I wanted to see,
right?
I want to see
modern
that.
Day stuff.
Like,
yeah.
right.
And that's what Larry brought to the table with this never before seen stuff. So it was really wonderful to have these opportunities of capturing projects in these realms of different time. So we started curating them by saying, okay, here's the Magic Palace exhibition. They were all the clips from the Magic Palace. Then we started getting James Allen at our office very busy, and he started working on digitizing and categorizing, tagging, linking. So he's the human element in all of this. We didn't want to just throw it out there to YouTube and just place it there.
Right.
We're helping the viewers by...
It is an archive. It's not just a...
Exactly.
Right?
Now it's cross-referenced. It's adding all of this metadata is really key to helping then coordinate and link to make it a little more meaningful and interesting. and as you've pointed out, searchable as an archive. So
Yeah.
having stacks of pieces of paper is useless unless you have a table
Right.
of contents.
Right.
Right now we have a book.
Right.
So it's that kind of thing, and having a human element like something that James is doing makes it really a rich experience and interesting. Because if you like something, hey, I didn't know you had this on Charlie Miller. You click on that. Oh, I didn't know
Look
that.
at all
Like,
this Charlie Miller
right?
stuff.
Oh,
Right.
I didn't know. Is I love hearing that. Oh, what
Totally.
about and
Yeah.
it's fun. So we've created all of these little archives, and then thanks to Adam Rubin and Luis Pedrojita, we got the Juan Tamariz's Chanta Tachana and Luna de Verano, and that's a variety show. So they had helped us digitize that. We put it on, and Juan gave us his blessing to have that in the screening room so people can enjoy it. You can see some great stuff. And in fact, we were so touched because Jonathan Pendragon, we just bumped into him in Los Angeles back in May. And he said that's one of the best versions of the Pendragons performing. I think he was referring to the sawing.
Oh, cool.
And he saw it on our site.
Yeah.
And he says,
Oh, wow.
and he singled us out. He tracked me down across the hotel,
Yeah.
the range there.
Yeah.
And it was so fun to see that it meant something for an archival purpose to him too, because now the world can see that it was once a challenge and that we innovated that. And he's so proud of that.
It's so amazing. And it's also so like, it's moments in history, and all these people, like, we get to see like what they were 30 years ago, or names that were just
ethereal,
names, right? You get to actually watch, and in conversations with people, and I'm specifically referring to James, but in conversations with people, one can say, so-and-so's this routine. Here's the clip from them doing it in their prime at the right, and you can think about it, and you can converse about it, and you can. So it's very cool to have like moments like that.
The basis of its history, its meaning to others, the influence.
Yeah,
you're right. It has a great, and I'm really glad you see that it has this ability to foster the history, so you know where it's coming from. You could see its evolution. It gives it more meaning somehow, right? Like it gives it some more value to the operator, to the owner of that material as well.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about and you'll have to help me with the name of it because I keep butchering it. But what's the name of the Alan Slate Award that goes to the young performer? What's that called?
We have two. We have the Canadian Rising Star and the International Rising Star.
Canadian Rising Star, International Rising Star. So both incredible because, like, again, like you were mentioning earlier, like magicians get to be like, awarded for their work in the magic community. But from the perspective of a young Canadian magician, it's very cool to watch people who stand out to me as magicians win big prominent awards. I'm thinking specifically of people like Eric Leclerc and Nick Wallace, are just two names that just pop into my head as people who it's like, yes, like it's so exciting to watch people get this kind of recognition. And so talk a little bit about these awards, how they're awarded, how you search for these.
We are so blessed, as I say, with the Slate Family Foundation for just recognizing magic in this form, and in this case, an art form. And they champion the art by putting real meaning behind the award itself. And that's with the cash prize. So we have 5 categories. There's the 2 that you just mentioned, the International Rising Star, the Canadian Rising Star, so for young people. But there's also one on sharing secrets. And that's where, that's an interesting one I'll get back to in a minute. We also have one called Sharing Wonder, where it celebrates a performer who, Derek Delgadio, for example, was one of our past Sharing Wonder ones, but so is Penn and Teller. So we had Darcy Oak, another Canadian, and all of these wonderful performers have had these tremendous track records. So it also gives, I think, the public an awareness of the range and reach that it has. And then we also recognize lifetime achievement. So we've had 4 years. This is our 5th year coming up in June. At the end of June, we're hoping to release the news of our recipients this year. And the awards we're there exactly to do that, to recognize great work. So it's exciting when people, we send a sort of a general notice out to let people know, okay, it's a little
Right, it's
easier now that
coming or
people,
whatever, right,
know.
yeah.
So it's open, and we solicit for nominations, and people, and it's an open sort of process in that regard. Like, you can nominate yourself. Like, that's not part of our, we don't know you, so let me
Right.
meet you.
Tell me
right?
everything about
Yeah.
your,
So
right.
we there's no sort of penalty for doing that. So we encourage that, and it's tough because there are a lot of great potential people
Amazing, of
out there
course.
to be awarded these things. So it makes it difficult, but we have a little committee that works through the nomination process, and it takes a little bit of time. And last year we made a big step to try and take it outside of just an event. We used to award the awards themselves, release the news at an event, but we took it online, and that was great because it really broadened the audience for people to see it as it was happening. So that was really fun, and I enjoyed that process a lot because it gives the anticipation. Like, so Nick Wallace, who you mentioned, was last year's Canadian Rising Star, and it was terrific. It was, I think, a genuine surprise to him, and he was very gracious in his thank you. And when one looks at his trajectory of what he's done, how hard he's worked for, not to say because he's a young person, but he's dedicated himself
sure.
to this.
Literally, as we speak, he's on America's Got Talent.
Right. I saw that too. That's fantastic. I get to be very proud of that,
Right.
that participation of helping, recognize his great work. And that's what these awards do. It's a really rich opportunity for us.
It's awesome, and it's both a place to keep your eye on, to be informed about the top of what's going on right now, but also a really great place to look back on and see this kind of
The
thing
springboard, yeah.
move forward. So a very cool thing. Talk to me a little bit about the award that you guys just won at the Magic Castle.
Well, we didn't set out to win an award, but we were given this great honor from the Academy of Magical Arts, the Literary and Media Fellowship. So they have a series of awards each year, and the AMA has a process where you can vote for like best stage magician, best lecturer. They also have special fellowships and recognition awards, awards of merit. So this year Magicana was inside of the fellowship category, and we've got some pretty awesome predecessors behind us. So it's kind of cool to be included in that great company. And it was wonderful to see that our peers also recognize what we're doing. The people see that we're trying to create this larger organization of accessible resources in a way that helps form and shape opinions about magic to everybody. Not just magic specific aficionados or enthusiasts, but to, like we keep talking about, to this public. And that was really cool. I think it's a great honor. We were invited to go to, that's why I was in LA. We got invited, David, Ben, and I were invited to go down to collect the award. And it was huge to look back and to realize that Magicana has been sort of in formation for 18 years. This is our 19th year. And I've been with Magicana since 2006. So it's been an exciting way to see what started so early in my time with Magicana, where we are now, and what we've accomplished and we've been able to do. And then to be recognized for it, it was kind of a wow, we did that.
Yeah,
it was
big
great.
moment.
It was a
Well,
really
congrats.
great moment.
It was very
Thank
cool.
you. Thank you.
A lot of very cool to see it also in a lot of places, and just
Yeah.
like, Magicana is
Yeah,
really cool.
it's nice to be recognized in the international scale too.
I was told to ask you the question, what is My Magic Hands?
Well, this is an exciting part for me to talk about. My Magic Hands is an education program that Magicana runs as an outreach program. And it started off as a program to work inside of Toronto locally and to bring in the idea of magic as a metaphor for creative thinking, problem solving, but also to do confidence building and self-esteem. So we reached out to communities that perhaps were at what we would categorize as at risk. So difficult situations or low-income families, or, you know, just these a little bit less accessible resources to these particular communities. We worked a lot with community centers, but we also connected with Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Center. It was called something else way back when, but we've been doing that since 2004, actually. That was even longer. We had a pilot project that we started with that. And I have really found that that's been a passion of mine. It's a program that's now evolved into an 8-week or 6-week, depending, program where kids are brought in and they work with magic coaches. So that's a volunteer, and usually an adult volunteer, but a volunteer that sits with the students. So we call the students the magicians, and so they have a coach, and the magicians sit with their coach, and they work on tricks together, tricks that we teach. And that we then send the young magician and their coach to work on. And then they learn the mechanics, but you quickly realize that, well, okay, we know how the trick works, but now what? Oh, you had to present it. And both the magician and the coach realize this is harder than we thought. And it's really fire under certain tushies, because the hook about the whole program is you have to perform at the end of our course. So there's sort of what we like to say skin in the game. And it's exciting because you see horror on the faces on day one when we have to perform a show, to at the end where they are so proud of what they've accomplished. And there's nothing better as the group leader, when I get to teach that program, to seeing the last day. And we take them through the entire process. We really teach them how to perform, how to practice, how to rehearse, how to present. And then we then have this, we call it the big show. So the kids invite people to come and see it, you know, their family and friends, but they also get to see their coaches in the audience cheering them on, which is so fantastic for our participants. And the children also have to really get into it. You know, they have to be bigger than themselves. And it helps build self-esteem in facing a world where crazy things are going to happen, and you're just going to have to meet that, you know, but you can meet that if you're ready. And we have this program to help bolster their readiness. And I love this program. What an amazing program. It's fantastic.
That sounds fantastic. I do a lot of teaching in the summer. I teach a lot of kids magic, and it's the best part is they have to perform it. That's the best part, is getting them up and performing and doing magic.
I think that's the important hook that gives them being the participants, the real two things. The journey is what's important to us, because when we started creating the program for Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Center, it was to help on a therapeutic level, but I never approached it, and nor do any of our instructors, as a therapy. This is recreational. Yeah. So some of the kids we were working with have brain injuries to recover from. So there could be a lot of memory issues, physical issues. There could be a lot of psychological issues we may or may not know about. So the kids don't necessarily present these problems in front of us, and we don't actually assume them. Right. So they're faced with this what they believe is a recreational program from Magicana, and they're doing things that they will not do for their therapists. Right. So, for example, we have a cup and ball trick where you have to stack the cups and you have to handle these little fluffy balls. It's very a tactile thing to do, and it's also a dexterity measuring thing. And kids can't stand doing therapy, but they'll practice over and over and over again for our magicians as their teachers, because they want to get the trick. You know, there's a whole different aspect.
There's a
whole different
performing
aspect. And then they want to get up and do it again because they want to perform it. Like, their hands shoot up. There's nothing for me more rewarding than watching their therapists see their students, their participants just change. They transform in front of their own eyes. It's magical. It really is. And I have found that's been something that has really given me a lot of intrinsic joy in watching these kids progress. So the journey is super important.
And you do this every year?
We do this throughout the year. And there's lots of programming opportunities. We used to do them more inside of the community, but we quickly realized that finding those volunteer coaches is fundamental. And it's also really difficult to find the measures of safety that the children need. So we were working with community centers, and registration's not our core ability. So that's where working someone where the hospital,
someone who can do that
exactly.
sort of thing,
So we found the right partners in that. So now we work on their schedules and we work inside of their facilities, and so everybody's safe. We have great participants. We have great coaches. We have an amazing supporting group inside of the therapists that want to work with the program. And it's really taken off. Like we're involved with like the speech therapy people. We're involved with volunteering. We're involved with just the occupational therapists, the families. It's an exciting way to see it blossom in its own, magical way.
What a great program. Can you tell me a little bit about this documentary that came out, The Science of Magic?
Yes, that was fun. I was asked to work with Daniel and Donna Zuckerbrot. They're filmmakers, they're documentary filmmakers, and they work with the CBC. And the Nature of Things was interested in their idea of doing the science of magic. So I was asked to be a part of that inside of sort of hosting the show. And I hadn't really worked in front of a camera in that way. I'm always doing live performances. So it was a really wonderful opportunity for me to work with friends that I know, to work with this great organization, and to film magic. I mean, I've never had to film it before. I've consulted, I've assisted, but I've never got to do it. So it was really exciting.
That's awesome.
And it was interesting because we worked on the segments. Now the documentary itself talks about how magic and science are integrating themselves, and how science is actually borrowing from magic for their scientific research, which is very interesting in itself. And in the end, we also got to do a lot of magic to sort of showcase that magic can have a level of awareness that maybe you weren't always aware for the public that it existed. And I got really great feedback from the public. Yeah.
And if listening to this didn't make people jealous enough of not being Canadian, you can go check out the whole documentary on the CBC website if you live in Canada. But if you don't, then I don't know where you can find it. Probably nowhere, but maybe somewhere soon.
Well, we're hoping that now that the documentary has been out for a year, it's going to perhaps go into an international market. So I'd be very hopeful that you should stay tuned to Magicana. You might see that.
Am I allowed to ask you about 31 Faces North?
Yes, not so silent secret.
Okay.
Sure.
So tell me a little bit about what is that? What is this big secret, not secret?
The not secret side of 31 Faces North. 31 Faces North is a conference that Magicana hosted for many, many years that brought together exactly that, 31 participants. And it was off of this trick, the famous Stuart James trick, 51 Faces North. When Alan Slade and David Ben set up the chairs, they said, oh, look, there's 31. So Alan said, 31 Faces North.
That's great.
And of course, coming to Canada, most of our guests coming from the States would have to face north. So it's a small invitation-only gathering. Why small? Why invitation only? It's a great question, because I think in the magic world, when we have these larger magic gatherings from let's say, 75, 100 people to 1,600 to 3,500, it's very difficult to interact with people. You start interacting with a small group of people. Well, that's what 31 is. It's a small group of people. You kind of have to interact with each other. And in doing that, it's a self-programming group. So they're invited to come to Toronto. It's hosted by David Ben and Alan Slade. And Alan Slade, being this amazing, generous person, loves magic, loves his friends, and he also helps by producing this event so we can invite people to come up. And they host dinners. We have, great gatherings. And what happens is the group then generates the programming. So people get up and have talks. People then get up and perform. And it's really fun because it's different for your peers, apparently. It turns out these veteran performers, now I should step back a bit. The group that's invited are veteran performers from around the world, as well as what we like to call these rising stars in magic. Perhaps not so known, but definitely showing potential. And what happens is the group in itself starts talking, oh, have you heard of this person? Did you know this person? And we start to hear about various people. And And the next thing you know, you have a slightly more veteran group with a slightly younger, sort of not novice, but certainly not perhaps known group, but definitely an age difference in the sense that by merging the two together, you get fostering
And also
some really
bridging some-
great,
yeah.
incubating some really great opportunities, and wonderful relationships have truly come from that, which we're really, really proud of.
You were talking about big magic conventions, and I had an interesting experience at a magic convention where, there was two incredible performers and well known, and they were ignoring all the people there to see them and talking to each other, and I was like.
Really?
What? Like, you guys could be friends with each other anytime, and this is the time. And then I thought back, and I was like, you know what? They probably live on other sides of the world. They're probably, great friends. They love to share magic, and this is their one time, and all they get is bothered by hundreds of magicians, and sort of changed my perspective a little bit. So I think, having this whole small invite only, or even just small, makes such a big difference. You can actually be a part of things in a different way.
Well, absolutely. I think, I've attended these large conferences and I've loved it. It's interesting. You see productions that you couldn't see at a teeny tiny conference, and you can't see at a small conference. I've as growing up in magic, we often went to conventions. My father was very active in the magic community, so we also organized a lot of conferences. I've always been working in magic, and I've seen the difficulties of engaging with people, the busyness, the pressure. People are running from one lecture hall to the next. You don't always get an opportunity to see each other. And the small conferences, I think that trend is starting to pick up a bit, not just with 31. We were really spoiled because 31 became a great incubator, but it also became a great place for friends to get together. And in that, I have fostered some really great and amazing friendships with, I call them all, they happen to be all men, but these are like my brothers, or my uncles, or, they're father figures to me. These are really amazing, supportive, interesting people. And I feel very safe because of that community that we built in this smaller conventions. And I think that's one of the things that does come from a small gathering. So when you see these retreats that are done, I think there's these little opportunities to hang out. And, Mike Close did something like this not so long ago, and he had Jason England.
Retreats,
and he had Johnny Thompson. Imagine hanging out. Well, I got to do that with these guys, but imagine hanging out with them. They're really interesting. And you get to hear, to learn, to absorb, to converse. You don't often, like you said, you can see these people at these large conventions, but you don't often have the opportunity to engage.
When people ask me how I learn magic, I often start by telling them that I learned from books and videos, but the real truth, and I tell them the real truth is I get to learn from people, directly from people. That's where I learn my magic.
That's how I grew up learning.
That's where, even I've so many books I've read, and then I just sit with the person, and then that's when I learn it. So much of it does come down to just finding a way to just carve out that time to sit with your heroes if you can, or sit with the people that can help you move 1-2 steps further, whatever that is.
Exactly. And I think that's a really great point. Is that's what conventions really were designed to do before the age of the internet, right? It brought people together. You had an opportunity to see someone that you've heard so much about, you've read and studied, but you've never seen a video. We didn't have that kind of access before. And remember when videotapes were actually really expensive because they were, you can't give them away now. You cannot give them away now. In our time at the store, I was looking at this astronomical price of $95 for a VHS from, I think it might have been A1. And now I cannot give that away. Isn't it funny? But that's the point, is when you're right with someone face to face, or even in a lecture format where, say, they're presenting and you're sitting in the audience, you're hearing the words that you've read, or you're seeing the routine that you've envisioned by its creator or author or originator. And you're like, wow, now I'm vested. You've taken the time to be there, to go there, and to show that commitment. That's important.
You mentioned earlier all of your brothers and fathers in magic.
Yes.
is there anything that you want to talk about or mention in terms of the landscape of women in magic?
I think that that's a really interesting area right now. I think that it's, I've grown up in a period of time where that wasn't so much as a big deal for me. I know that that's not always the case with my contemporaries. And I do see that it's difficult, it's different, and you're not excluded, but you're certainly viewed differently necessarily. Just like I see men in magic very differently.
Right, of course.
No one's asked me how is it like to
Right.
look at men in magic,
Of
right?
course,
They always
of
ask me about
course.
the women in magic.
Right.
But I think that there's a great history in women in magic. There's also a great number of women in magic. I think that also there are great supporters of women in magic. And I have been very, very blessed by that. My father started me very early on, but I have always known myself to be the only girl in the room for my growing up period, and that's like, but I would hang out with like 60, 70, 80 year olds, and I was truly a kid. I wasn't even allowed to really go. I wasn't even 16, but I'm going with my father, so these guys would become like these uncle figures to me. And hey, you're working on this. Well, did I show you this? Oh, you should read that. Like I got this great community of people supporting me, asking me to, hey, can you teach me that? Or would you mind doing a little lecture for our group? And it was fun and inviting. And as I moved through magic, and again, I know I'm a little more on the unique side of it because I grew up in it. My father also had his arm around me in that scenario, in that visual scenario. So he was constantly introducing me to people in magic as well. And I had a really nice entree because of that. And then, my father did introduce me to David Ben. So now I'm in Toronto. And then David with Alan is hosting 31. So now I'm meeting these amazing individuals who I'm so very, very fortunate to call them. I'm grateful to call them my 31ers, my boys. I call them my boys. Is that allowed anymore? But I have met some amazing individuals. And they've only supported me, and only embraced seeing more magic from me or things of magic from me. Like they've always pushed me in that creative, healthy way. And I'm very, very fortunate for that. I know that's not so easy for some women in our trade, and it is difficult. But I think magic in general is difficult. It's a tough business.
Totally.
And I also see that as I perform more and more now, it's not so novel that I'm a woman performing magic, which is kind of fun too to see. I remember when I was performing, when I was a kid, my dad would take me to these magic shows, and so my father's there, the elder male, and there's his daughter. So I was 12, 14 years old, something like that, because I wasn't driving yet. So the children would assume that my dad was doing the magic. Right. And he said, no, that's your magician. And that's how he trained me to think, no, I am. And to own it. Right. So that was good. That was really nice and healthy. And then I also see that kids don't make that assumption today. I got roped into doing a show for my nephew, the famous 4-year-old. And he got me to come down to perform. And the kids didn't bat an eye that there's a woman doing magic, and that's kind of cool for me too.
That's great. It's good to know that it was only positive experiences.
I'm very fortunate, and my job is to make sure I find ways of making sure, exactly. that's the landscape that I would like young women to see.
Yeah, and it's good that there's no one you have to wag a finger at or anything, but instead the opposite. And it's just like, it's been great, and let's keep that going.
And I think that there's a great opportunity for supporters in magic who happen to be male to also champion that. I think there are a great number of very strong supporters of magic who want to see more balance in general. I used to get very almost frustrated with people. Oh, why aren't there more women in magic? Or why are there so few women in magic? Or making these assumptions about women in magic. I was getting exhausted by it. And then I realized, okay, maybe that's who, I can't change who I am. So maybe, well, I don't want to. Now that we can say that we can, but I don't want to. Right. I like being a woman in magic. So my job then is to talk about it and to share my experiences and to find ways that if it hasn't been a good experience, well, how can we change and fix that so that it can be? that's my job now. And
And use your
want to do that.
experiences to help shape your magic and shape, the landscape.
Absolutely. I'd love to see more of that. I had that great opportunity to meet your producer, Jackie, with her friend Felice.
As well,
yeah. And to have a conversation with these ladies about their experiences of being a woman in magic, I was dumbfounded. These girls are a little bit younger than me, and I was dumbfounded by the glass ceiling that they're smashing into. Still, my head was spinning. And I was so frustrated. I'm like, I thought that, Celeste Evans, I was just like, she championed women in magic. She owned it. She was amazing. I was so honored when we got to introduce her to one of our conventions, and she and her daughter had an interview together. It was wonderful. And she talked about how hard it was. And these girls, these young ladies, I'm just trying to do the math. They've got to be almost, 60 years between the two, Celeste to the women. And I was stunned. Like, they're still facing some very, very unbelievable difficulties. So I said, okay, that's when I changed my mind. Yeah, you know what? Maybe what we need to do is to have the conversation.
And we had, Felice was in town it was the Bash, but it was, we had our Women in Magic show, which was great.
Yes,
so much
they
fun.
were telling me about it. It was wonderful.
So much fun. It's just like cool to be able to do that and like just be able to like showcase 5 amazing women in here.
Yes,
we put together
5 amazing magicians who happen to be women.
Exactly. So it was very, very nice.
I thought that was that was really great. That it was not a Women in Magic show, but it was these great individuals who just happened to all be in town, and look at that, they all happen to be women too.
You know what? We actually went back and forth on it a lot because part of us said 5 amazing magicians. Oh, by the way, they're women. And then other part of us said, like, there's shows around Toronto that champion that it's an all-women comedy lineup. And they're not being like, oh, it's a lineup. Oh, look, surprise. Like, they're making a point to do that. And right. I think we actually wanted to make a point to celebrate, here's amazing women in magic, and not just like, hey, this is a regular show. We plenty of time have women on our regular shows. We love to. It's great. But this was a great time to be like, you know what? And Ben and I said, you guys make the poster, you guys name the thing, you guys make the thing. This is the Women in Magic, like because we wanted to champion it, right?
Exactly.
We wanted to be like, this is amazing, come. And it was great. And we had so many people that came out that, like you were talking about earlier, is that phrase of, I didn't know that, or, oh, I wish I knew that, da-da-da. We got that so much that night that it was
See, that's
really
great. A nice thing to see. It's I think that's the energy I got from speaking to Felice and Jackie, and I was really pleased by that. I was happy to see the individuals who happen to be women got together and found that celebration, that spirit of celebration. That for me, fun. That's the whole intention. And that's what I mean. Like, those are the opportunities I like to see more of, where everybody feels good about what we're doing here. And I grew up feeling like I was always a little oddball out because people would say, "Oh, you're a woman in melody. Like, this is a big surprise. Right. I hope you're good." Is what
you're like, you're shocked. I'm not. Right?
Yeah, like yeah. I got that sense of, "Oh, are you good enough?" Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know why that would be. So it's like, but I'm sure women who are perhaps in traditional jobs, one that popped into mind was like a mechanic, right? Well, you're not strong enough. Well, like, says who? Like, what does that have to do with anything?
Totally.
Or butchers, but that's for men. Why? Yeah. So it's this notion that's changing, and I want to see that landscape really advance a little bit further. So that maybe that's what my next job in Magicana will be.
Is that a hint at an upcoming project?
Maybe. Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the Johnny Thompson books.
Yes.
I know that you worked very hard on
yes.
that project, and
Johnny was very dear to all of us. He was very dear to all of us, and his book came together. It was always in the making. It started with Johnny and Jamie Ian Swiss working on it, but they worked on it when they could see each other. When, as you already know, working magicians, they have a very difficult time
crossing paths,
really setting time aside. Writing a book is not an easy task. And now Johnny had this huge repertoire. He was famous for it. It was mammoth, and he wanted this to be the definitive book. Well, after the challenges of trying to just put the material together, never mind produce it, we were at 31. And Johnny and Jamie approached David Ben and said, I think maybe it's time we talk to you about perhaps publishing the book with Magicana. We had just released a new book at the time. I believe it was The Experts at the Card Table. So maybe around 2015, something like that. And we got together and so we had a few conversations and when it was agreed. And I ended up doing the photography for the book and the layout, and then I worked with Johnny very closely as a result to is this how this is done? Because I was taking the photos with him, and we were working on editing some of the language, making sure this is the final copy. So that was a really special time for me, and a particularly difficult time because I had a terrible loss in my life, and my husband had passed away suddenly in 2017. So it was a very surprising moment. And Johnny had called me right after he heard the news. I was just leaving I think I was just leaving the hospital, and he says, "Okay, well, we'll put a pause on the book." I'm like, "No, I need to do this now. I really need to focus." So I poured myself into the book for that year, and then we worked through the summer, and I would go to Vegas to photograph him. And like the guys,
what an incredible experience! And there's like hundreds of photos
right? In the book, and we took thousands of photos, but I had to distill it down to hundreds, and it was the best time.
I was gonna say you guys must have had an amazing.
It was
amazing
the best time. I will say it was hard work, and I loved every single moment. I loved every single. Working with Johnny was so special. He was full of information. He's full of stories, full of energy. And he was exhausted. We would work 12, 14 hours on this stuff. I would only go for short bursts into Vegas, and I'd have to nail him down. So he would okay. And he never complained. This is, I can't do this right now. He never, ever.
What you just said of it was the best time ever and the hardest you've ever worked. I wish that combination on everyone. It's the best combination.
Yes,
what an incredible combination.
There's nothing more satisfying than seeing what now, because with him passing and everything, it was very difficult because all he wanted was to see that book come out. And he did. And the happy part of the story is that he saw the book's success. It sold out. For a magic book, as you know, is near, not such a common thing anymore. But then we reprinted it, and we've almost sold out that second reprint. So it's one of the most successful projects we've certainly been associated with. And I dare say, I think one of the more pivotal books. It's amazing that Johnny saw the success of the book. And that for me was wonderful. And then it was very, very sad that he passed away sort of at the height of that wonderfulness. That said, Johnny was always living in the present. He always told you how he felt in the moment. So he was always happy with me, and I'm very grateful for that. It's stressful doing this kind of a project, and he was working day and night with Penn and Teller and on Fool Us and all of these things. So it was nice that I had that side of Johnny too.
Some time with him.
Yeah.
And, it seems like it plays this notion of Magicana working to have an archival knowledge of magic. It seems like that fits right in. And that,
it was a great fit. His project became one of our, it really was a humongous project. Everybody worked very hard on it. It was a difficult task from beginning to end. And the whole office was, really put to task on taking care of certain chunks. And you can burn out really quickly on that if you're not careful, because, there's just such a demand on organizing it all. So we really, the team came together to make this work for Johnny. We loved Johnny, and I'm so happy. I'm very proud of the work, and I'm really excited that Magicana got a chance to produce it, and that Johnny saw it. That's for us was the most important thing. Let's get this done. We don't want to release it posthumously, so I'm very, very happy.
Last question before we get to the final wrap up bit. Having led a life of magic from before you could remember,
Yes, it's true.
One of the early questions that I just said very quickly was, have you ever not known how the trick worked? Really many people get in magic and then they fall out of love.
Yeah, no, that's a really great way of saying it. And I've seen that. I've seen that.
So are there any moments or turning points or things that you use to keep it feeling, keep this like
Absolutely.
engulfment in magic feeling
Yeah.
fresh?
I think collaboration's really, really important. And magic is tough, and you can find yourself into, if you do everything like an entrepreneurial a person wearing several hats, you can feel very insular and not reach out sometimes. And I think when one turns into a collaborative mode and starts reaching out to people and working with other people, all of a sudden new possibilities spring up like daisies. It's wonderful. So I really find that to be a great, I have some friends that, hey, I was working on this thing, and then like, oh, did you check that? But have you tried this? Like, what if you did this? Like, none of that will maybe work or be reasonable or whatever. But the thought process opens everything up, and for me, that springs forth this really excited feeling of, okay, let's solve this. Let's work that out.
One of the beauties of the like working things out is not only working out things with the magic knowledge that you have, but also working things out with like the Rolodex of people. And like sometimes that's just as fun of a joy as problem solving on a magic trick, is saying like, who knows the right answer to this question? That guy. Like that sometimes plays a really big role. And it's the same,
It's the same idea. So what are you doing? You're building a network. And that for me has been really great. I have a great network of amazing friends. I've been in magic a long time, and I've seen a lot of magic. And I see lots of magic that I love. Some magic I don't love. Of course. Because that's just the range of what we're like everything. There's some things, some foods I don't like to eat, but I try it. And I think that happily for me still exists. There was always this wondering of, have I hit where I'm going to go with magic? Have I stopped? And I started I've had a couple of crazy life experiences where when my dad died in 2008, that was a very difficult time for me. But I got back into it, and I slowly started performing again, and I got into it more and more, and it was fun and exciting. I got a project like Johnny's to work on, and I am revved up. I love magic, and I'm back into it. But when my husband died, I didn't expect the side of me to a part of me to disappear, literally. And I really didn't. I know you read about it, you hear about it, people warn you. You can never be ready. And I didn't expect the recovery on that to take so long, or to feel the way I felt. And what happened? I turned back into my magic community. That's where a lot of people who knew me also knew my husband. And that was a really great thing, that the support, the gentleness, the empathy of a person. And then they really wanted to see me come back to my life. And they started, especially my family, like they started slowly redirecting me back into things that I do. So my sister let loose my little nephew. Maybe you should do a show for me, Auntie. Like that kind of thing, like to get me back into that world. And that friend saying, hey, I'm having this dinner party. Come on, let's maybe you should do a little something for them. And just slowly, gently bringing me back, because it was hard to figure out what I was doing. I couldn't go to the grocery store. I couldn't do the laundry. You lose part of yourself. So magic kind of, it's fun. For me, what's poignant is that's what Johnny always said to me. He said that magic always saved him. He had some major tragedies in his life, and he always said to me, but magic came back to me. It saved me. Magic gave me my family, like his magic family. And and he's right. He's true. And I'm very grateful that I've had that legacy thanks to my father. And then, when Julie passed away, so many, again, my 31ers, they were like taking care of me. It was really amazing. We had I was given an opportunity to perform, and I was very hesitant at first. Julie had died in January, so late January. And I was called up in April for this possible job in August. And I thought, I don't know. I don't know. And then I thought, you know what? Maybe I almost heard Sue, like, I think you better think about, doing that. And I'm really glad I did. And I got really well supported from that. And since that, and then with the more and more of that, magic has become this community. So I advocate for reaching out to people, looking for, there's not going to always be great opportunities. but there's not always going to be bad opportunities. Right. So we might as well take the good ones.
Yeah, and
look for them.
Keep open to that stuff. And it reminds me of, I think it's a Tarbell quote, what you need from magic gives you, or, you know, like we see that over and over. And it also sounds like, you know, one of the solutions to maybe falling out of love and magic or struggling with that is relationships, and, you know, building that network and just having those people and having those relationships, and like that'll save you from getting lost in magic.
I think it's also that's a really great thing. It's about relationships, and then allowing yourself to being a little bit vulnerable to say, look, I'm not feeling good about this. Do you think we could talk about that? You know, instead of taking from people, perhaps ask. And you'd be so surprised at how generous and giving and wonderful the people around you really truly are. And then it comes back to you in these waves, these wonderful waves. And I'm really seeing that now, you know, and when I needed all of that, that came back to me, and it was a very wonderful, overwhelming wave.
It's amazing. It's good to hear the strength of the magic community.
It's really wonderful.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We're getting towards the end of the episode, so we have a bunch of wrap-up questions. So the first is the endless chain. So in order to keep the podcast going on for eternity, each guest is asked to recommend another guest, with the caveat that you have to be able to put us in contact. So who should we? And I told you before we started.
Who are you looking for?
Well, you know all my goal people. But who we absolutely must have on an episode of the podcast?
Oh, there are too many. I would be happy to see you put on. Perhaps, did you get Suzanne for Women in Magic? Yep. Or there's Carissa Hendricks, of course. Yep. I think that would be a really interesting one. Done. You know, have you also reached into, I'm just trying to think of some names here. I mean, there are just so many people. Oh my goodness. Have you talked to people who produce magic and like to see a different side of magic? I mean, you've got a theory and a business side of it. You know, I would definitely look into someone who's done well, like Steve Cohen. I'm thinking of, you know, this idea of success in magic from this career standpoint. There's also the creative side. I mean, who have you had for creative?
It's easier the other way because I've had a lot.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, you've got so many great people on there. I'll have to connect you with some. You know, I have all my favorite ones I'd like to hear. You know, who would you do?
Name a few that you would like. If you found out that I had an episode with them, that you would be like, I have to listen.
Oh, I love all of I've been watching on your Instagram. I see who comes up. Like I like that one with Gordon Fresh. It was just great. Was so much fun. Yeah, no, it was great. And I see you had Ryan Joyce. So you had a lot of Canadians up lately, actually. That's very interesting.
Yeah. You know what? Again, part of it, like I said, is like a lot of it is reaching out to people across the world, but a lot of it is like really just getting to know the stories of the people in my own backyard.
Yeah. Well, you've obviously had Nick then and Eric, because I think they were just wonderful.
Eric was the first ever episode.
Oh, and he's such an interesting person.
Yeah, so cool.
You know what? We should try and find someone who does magic, but who's done magic for a long time, attended something like Fechter's, and lives all the way out in, I want to say, Nova Scotia. Do you know Patrick? I'll have to find him for you.
Patrick who? Do you know?
Drake.
Patrick Drake. No. I don't. That's great. Done. The list continues.
Well, I just like this idea of a Canadian out there. Or, you know, there's another great friend of mine, Eric Bedard. He grew up, I believe, in Ontario, but then he traveled around. He ends up in Victoria. That's when I met him. I think he's lived in Victoria for 30 years. He just relocated to Ontario, and he's had a great success in magic. And he's really pursued it with this very positive and passionate buzz. It was a very interesting story. Beautiful. And there's also my friend Murray Hatfield. He ended up buying my father's magic shop.
Really?
Murray toured across Canada for over 20 years with his magic show. Did you ever see some of those performances? They often came through Toronto.
Well, I saw the ones. I'm sure it'll be wrong, and I'll just make a fool of myself. But when I was a kid, before I knew who people were, I saw certain magic shows that I think was him in like the Playhouse Theater in Vaughan or whatever. But
it could be.
I could be wrong.
He performed a lot,
yeah.
And he ended up producing the show for many, many years. I think over 20 years. You know, and then of course there's Greg Fruin. You would want to reach out to Greg in Niagara Falls and And of course, I'm sure you've had Sean Farquhar on. Yeah. So
that one was a really fun episode because we did it up at Magic Camp on the stage that we had just done a show.
Oh,
for
that's
the cameras.
fantastic.
It was just such a crazy,
Everybody.
experience, so.
Well, Sean always has a lot of energy, so
a lot of energy, a lot of great stories. That was really fun.
Yeah.
The next question is something about magic currently right now. So what's something in the 2019-2020 world of magic that you like that's happening, and something in the world of magic now that you don't like?
Well, I'll take the last question first. I think, as I said, I think there's just too much density of magic, and it's become this soundbite style of bits. And so on Instagram, for example, it's 20 seconds of this and 30 seconds of that, and I'm overwhelmed. I find I don't even want to watch it anymore. That for me, that isn't magic. So that I'm kind of not loving like this overflow and over mediaed. Not blaming social media. I think we just seen too many, the variety style of fast-paced magic. Some of the things I do like to see is the landscape changing with more artists coming into the field. I think that's interesting that people are challenging what is magic, theatrically, particularly. I find that always interesting. And I like to see how people would interpret the word magic. You asked me that early on. And I think so collaborative approaches to taking theater, let's just say dance or music and magic, how does that integrate into something new? And I think now's the time where collaboration's open, opportunities are there. People are willing to see this kind of unusual combination, or perhaps it's not so unusual. Maybe I'm naive to think that this hasn't been done before, because magic's been around for a long time.
The last thing is, we've been talking for like an hour and a half about loads of different things in magic, and people listen to this podcast doing all sorts of things, walking their dog, washing the dishes, whatever. And if we could distill this episode down to an idea or a moment or something, if they think back to this episode that they would remember, what would you want that thing to be?
I think that magic can still exist. I think magic has a great, wonderful, enchanting way of engaging with people. And I think magic is also best when it is face-to-face, in the sense that people can experience it. So it is experiential, like it's live and tactile, like I'm not on a screen, I'm with you. I think that is so important to communicate to people when we're educating the public, if you will, on magic. It has a great legacy and history. Let's see it move into the next century in this wonderful, magical way.
Totally. I love everything I love where magic's going. I love where it is. And, with some of the archival stuff that we were talking about, I love where it's been. So there's a lot to it. Julie, thank you so much for joining us this episode. It was so much fun.
For me
and
too.
And of course, a big thank you to everybody at home who had joined us for an episode. We will see you all next Thursday. Well, there you go. I hope you liked the episode, and I hope that you learned something. Do yourself a favor, go head over to the Magicana website and take a look at some of the videos. People like David Williamson, Juan Tamariz, Gaetan Bloom. It's unbelievable, and I've had so much fun doing it. Go take a peek at some old, never-before-seen footage, and if you like this episode, please spread the word. It's the only way that people find out about it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next Thursday. Peace!